Bicycle wheels are wonderful things, not least because they come with rubber tyres. But if you want to use them on a four-wheeled vehicle, you come across a big problem. Their axles are just too weak if you only support one side, so they'll just bend. This is my solution. I'm replacing everything except the rim and the tyre. I started by measuring the inside of the rim with a pizza cutter, and then I drew an accurate full-size drawing of what I want. I'm using a computer, but of course a big piece of paper would be fine too. I cut all the spokes the same thickness as the rim, and then I put chamfers on the spokes with spindle moulder, and then I cut them to length to give them a snug fit. More about that hub bearing in a minute. Using just part of my scale drawing, I made a full-size template for the little bits of wood, the inserts that go between the spokes. I cut it out of MDF because it's easy to shape, but MDF is also easy to wear out. So the first thing I did with my new template was make a tougher one out of 3/4 inch ply. Then I cut lots of blanks, just a little bit too big. This is the way I use the template for cutting out lots of pieces of wood all the same. I'm using a big bearing called a follower on my spindle moulder for this job. It's exactly the same size as my cutter block, so it makes shaping identical pieces easy. The bearing only touches the template, but the cutter cuts the workpiece above to the exact same size and shape. This big setup won't go into tight curves, but it's great for these big lumpy pieces. For those who don't know spindle moulders, they're just big upside down routers, and a router would do the same job. I deliberately made these inserts a bit too long because I didn't want them loose, and planing a little off the spokes made a good tight fit. And then I glued them all together and weighed them down so that the wheel stayed flat. I imagine even this would be enough for some applications, especially with screws through the rim holding everything together. But I need something much stronger for what I'm making. So I went back to my drawing and made another template for felloes. Each one covers 1/4 of the circumference, so I need only 4 per side. Because these are bigger pieces, they are much safer to hold. Most woodworking machines are pretty scary, but spindle moulders need your full, undivided attention at all times. Well, I suppose circular saws do too. Hey people, just be careful out there, okay? These fellows will cover the joints and make the wheel much stronger. I glued them up with polyurethane glue. This is the foaming glue that will fill up the gap made by the convex rim. I held the fellows tight with a ratchet strap, but then I had to take it apart again when I remembered I hadn't put any glue between the fellows. And then I put it all back together again and clamped it up tight. After doing the other side and waiting for the glue to dry, I cleaned up the joints, and there was quite a lot of fiddly bits to sand and clean and everything, so I invested in a cheap power file, which works surprisingly well. There are lots of ways of constructing the hub and the bearings. This is just a way that suits me. These wheels won't be going fast, but the hubs will still be taking lots of sideways pressure. So I used plywood shaped on the lathe. Plywood is dusty and not nice at all to turn, but at least it's reliable and it's not going to split. I used a grinding disc to finish the concave curve quickly. This is an adjustable hole boring tool that does a great job in no time. It only cost €12 because no one seemed to know what it was in the shop. It will only go in an inch at a time though, so I had to take the stack of plywood apart as I drilled. And then I put them back together again on either side of the spokes with glue and screws. That pipe in the middle is just mild steel, and I'm sure bearings could be mounted inside it at both ends, with a shaft spinning inside them for things like go-karts or carriages. But I'm just going to put a smaller pipe inside with lots of grease and no bearings at all. I think it'll be fine for my job. A router might be easier for this job of putting a chamfer right around the rim, but I figured out a way anyway on the spindle moulder. I knocked some little wedges in between the spokes, and then there was lots more sanding, but that's it. It's just about finished. It'll need some wood preservative before it gets painted. The tube and the tyre still go on, though I had to make quite a big hole for the valve, because the valve tube wasn't really long enough to go all the way through to the inside of the wheel, so I had to stick out the side. Anyway, I made all 4 wheels at the same time, and it was all a bit new, but once I'd worked out exactly what I wanted and made the 2 templates, they were really quite easy to make, and I think they look okay. I think so. Anyway, I hope this helps someone. More